we're back for another session here. Going to talk about cold-related illnesses. I don't have to worry about much. I got a fire beside me and Tinker the cat looking on as we present cold-related illnesses for you and how to prevent them first and how to deal with them in a first aid situation if they do occur. Now, first we're going to talk about prevention. Before we start with that, let's differentiate between systemic hypothermia, or the whole body is affected, and localized hypothermia, which would include frostbite. So with those two differences there, the way to prevent them is basically the same. In the case of generalized hypothermia, make sure that you take breaks. You know, children don't know when to stop playing in the snow sometimes. So we have to bring them inside and make sure that we give them those little warm breaks as they stay out in the cold air. Wrap them up. I don't know if you remember the Christmas Story movie, but Ralphie's little brother was a good example of that. And he was pretty much bundled up, maybe over bundled, but wear those layers of clothes. Serve them hot meals, hot drinks. It does increase the body temperature. A cup of hot chocolate, offer it to them. That's a good idea. And that kind of warms up the internal body temperature also. And that's some ways to avoid hypothermia. Of course, stay hydrated also. And of course, layered clothing for generalized hypothermia. And we already know a lot of this. A lot of this is already not stuff we already know, so kind of going over it though. But localized hypothermia, we're going to have to guard certain areas of our body. In order to prevent hypothermia, we need to make sure and keep our ears covered. And we need to keep gloves on, and of course warm and dry feet, shoes and socks. And the reason for that is those are the areas of the body that appear to present more hypothermic situations. The ears don't have as much blood flow in them. When you touch them, they're just not as warm. They don't have as much blood flow. So the ears are usually the first, and the extreme fingers. They don't have as much blood flow, and the extreme toes. So with those areas of the body, we have to protect them. And there's an old saying out there: if it's 20 degrees and the wind is blowing 20 miles an hour, within 20 minutes, generalized or frostbite can set in, I should say. So you can kind of vary that with the temperature. Of course, if it was 10 degrees outside, the wind was blowing 30 miles an hour, you could look at it in 5 minutes or less. So watch those areas and keep those covered because of the lack of blood flow in those areas mainly. And that's how we prevent it. Now, how do we determine if somebody has generalized hypothermia? They're going to be cold. They're going to be slurring their speech a lot of the times. They'll also be chattering their teeth, and sometimes they'll be a pale or an ashen color because the blood flow is reconcentrating naturally by the body into the internal organs and keep them warm. Of course, their hands are going to be very cold, and extremities because the blood doesn't flow there in larger levels. So with that in mind, we're going to try to warm the patient up very quickly. If they have wet clothes on, pull those off and pile the blankets on. Now, within 4 or 5 minutes, if they're not more responsive, quit chattering their teeth, turn a healthier color, improvement of conditions, you need to call 911 because there might be a reason why they stayed out in the cold too long anyway, an underlying reason. Disorientation from a stroke or something like that can happen. So in those situations, make sure you warm them up, as quickly as you can. And in 4 or 5 minutes, if they don't respond, you need to call 911 because of that underlying condition. Now, while in the meantime, until the EMTs and paramedics arrive, you need to, of course, monitor their breathing and make sure they stay responsive. And the more that they talk with them, and the more they talk, they'll be a good situation. Of course, if they do become unresponsive, check for breathing, and we'll talk about that in our CPR course we're going to have later on. Hope you'll watch that too. But how about localized hypothermia? The treatment for that's a little bit different. For localized hypothermia, Number one, we're going to get any restrictive clothing off if there's any restrictive clothing. Even though there's usually not swelling, we don't want any more tissue damage in those areas. Another thing we want to do is run very slightly warm water over it. And what I mean by that, it's kind of like the temperature that you check a baby bottle with, you know, about that temperature, the outer temperature of the epidermis. That's about the temperature of the water you want to run over it. I know everybody's always done this. If you're out in the cold, you get your hands real cold and you run in and you run real hot water over it. You get a real bad burning feeling sensation, and that's because your skin cells and your nerve cells are saying, you know, you go from one extreme to the other. I'm cold. Now you get me too hot. I don't like that. So slightly warm water until the EMTs and paramedics get there. Now, of course, always follow 911 instructions and listen to the 911 instructor, and they'll help you in situations like this also. And in the meantime, stay tuned for the next video, and we appreciate you watching this one, and have a good day. Bye-bye.